Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something that's changing the world right now. It's called synthetic data. You might be thinking, what is that?
Well, it's basically like, think of it as a really good replica of real-world data, but it's made artificially. And the best part is, it's helping us solve real-world problems in some pretty amazing ways.
Exactly. It's like,
Yep.
imagine you're a scientist working on like a groundbreaking new medical treatment. But to train your AI algorithms, you need tons of patient data, which can be really hard to get for privacy reasons. That's where synthetic data comes in.
Oh, so it's like a secret weapon for researchers and people making new things.
Exactly. And it's not just healthcare. We see it everywhere,
Yeah.
like in finance, marketing, self-driving cars,
Yeah.
even video games.
Wow, so this is a pretty big deal. But how do you actually create this fake data, it sounds like? How do you make it so realistic? Well, there are a couple different ways to do it. One way is, it's called rule-based simulations. And basically, you just set up a bunch of rules that define how the data should behave. Then you let the computer generate data based on those rules.
Okay, so, for
Yeah.
example, if you were trying to create synthetic data for like a self-driving car,
Mm-hmm.
you might set up rules about, I don't know, how pedestrians typically behave, like
Yeah.
at crosswalks, or how cars react to traffic lights.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're building a virtual world
Hmm.
with its own laws and then letting the data just flow naturally within those boundaries.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about the other method you mentioned, something about JANs?
Yeah, JANs. This is where things get really interesting. It stands for Generative Adversarial Networks. It's a type of AI that uses a pretty interesting technique. Imagine, you have two AI models. One's like an art forger, trying to make these fake masterpieces, and the other one is like an art detective, trying to spot the fakes.
Oh, so it's like a
Yeah,
competition between the AIs?
exactly. And as they compete, they both get better. So the forger gets better at making the fakes, and the detective gets better at spotting the flaws.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty smart. So basically, by competing, they're able to make that synthetic data super realistic.
You got it. That's how JANs are able to generate synthetic data. That's basically indistinguishable from the real world data. It's like having an AI that can create any data you could ever need.
That's amazing. But if it's so easy to create data, what are the downsides? Like, what if someone uses this technology for bad things?
That's a great question. And it's definitely something we're going to talk more about because synthetic data has so much potential. But it's important to remember that it's still just a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Okay, so there's more to this than just creating realistic data. There's like ethical stuff too.
Absolutely. But before we get into all that, let's talk about some of the good ways it's being used right now.
Okay, let's do it. Let's hear about the good stuff.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so we talked about how this synthetic data is made, but how is it actually being used to make a difference? Like in the real world?
Well, let's start with healthcare. Imagine doctors using synthetic data to diagnose diseases earlier and more accurately. That's what researchers are working on right now, using synthetic data to train AI algorithms that can see things like really subtle patterns in medical images that humans might miss.
So it's like giving doctors a superpower to see things they couldn't before.
Exactly. And that's just one thing. Synthetic data can also be used to develop like personalized treatments, test how well new drugs work, even create virtual patients for medical training.
Wow, so it's not just improving healthcare, it's like completely changing it.
Absolutely. And it's the same for other industries. Like in finance, synthetic data is being used to make fraud detection systems better and improve risk assessment models. That means safer transactions for us and a more stable financial system overall.
So that's healthcare and finance. What other areas are being changed by synthetic data?
Well, let's talk about self-driving cars. One of the hardest things about making them is training them to handle all the crazy situations. That could happen on the road. But how do you teach a car to react to like a sudden downpour or a flock of birds in the road when those things don't happen very often?
You make synthetic data.
So
Simulate them.
Exactly. By using synthetic data, engineers can create like millions of virtual miles of driving data to expose their AI systems to all kinds of situations, like unusual ones and dangerous ones.
That's incredible. It's like giving those cars a crash course in defensive driving.
Yeah.
But without any of the actual crashes.
Exactly. And synthetic data can also be used to improve traffic flow, optimize logistics, and even design smarter cities.
Wow, the possibilities are endless. But I have to admit, I'm still a little unsure about all this fake data. It just feels a little weird.
I understand. It's important to remember that synthetic data is only as good as the real-world data it's based on. So if the original data has problems, or is biased, those problems can show up in the synthetic data. That's why it's so important to use high-quality data and test it really well to make sure that synthetic data is accurate and reliable.
So it's not just a perfect solution. We still need to be careful.
Absolutely. Synthetic data is a powerful tool, but like any tool, it needs to be used responsibly. And that's something to always keep in mind.
So we talked about the potential of synthetic data.
Yeah.
And how important it is to use it responsibly. But where do we go from here? What's next for synthetic data?
That's a great question. I think we're just getting started with synthetic data. As AI gets better, we can expect even more realistic synthetic data and even more amazing applications. And who knows, maybe one day, synthetic data will be so good that we won't be able to tell it apart from real data.
That's a crazy thought.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for us? If we can create any data we want, what does that mean for our privacy, our security, even our understanding of what's real?
Those are all really important questions, and we need to think about them. As synthetic data becomes more common, it's a powerful tool that could change the world. But it's up to us to make sure it's used for good.
It sounds like we're entering this really exciting time, but it could also be challenging with synthetic data, So what can we do as individuals to make sure this technology is used ethically and responsibly?
That's a really important question. I think awareness is key. The more we know about synthetic data, like how it's made, how it's being used, what kind of impact it could have, the better we'll be able to make good decisions and, hold the people making it accountable.
So doing our own research and staying informed, that's a good first step.
Exactly. There are tons of great resources out there, articles, podcasts, even online courses and communities where you can learn all about synthetic data. And don't be afraid to ask questions. This field is always changing. Even the experts are still learning and figuring things out.
Okay, so knowledge is power. But besides learning about it, what else can we do?
I think it's important to support companies and organizations that are trying to do things the right way with synthetic data, Look for companies that are transparent about how they do things, companies willing to talk about the risks and benefits, and companies that are committed to using this technology for good.
So it's like we can choose who to support with our money and our voices.
Exactly. And don't forget about just talking to people about this. Talk to your friends, family, coworkers about synthetic data. The more we talk about it, the less mysterious it becomes, and the better chance we have of making sure it's used to benefit everyone.
That makes sense. Well, I feel like I've learned a lot today about how synthetic data is made, the potential it has, and how important it is to use it responsibly. Any final thoughts?
I think the main thing to remember is that synthetic data is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's up to us to decide what kind of future we want. For synthetic data,
I agree. It's been a really interesting deep dive into the world of synthetic data. And for everyone listening, remember, you don't have to be a tech expert to understand all this. Stay curious, keep learning, and let's work together to shape the future of data.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring